Good morning, everyone. So today we're going to talk about how to compute distant quadrant attributes, what's the science behind it, and how to plot them in AASPI. But before we talk about distant quadrant attributes, it's important that we talk about AVO because distant quadrant is a family of attributes, the AVO attributes. Well, what is AVO? So what happens is, let me turn on my pointer. So AVO is amplitude versus offset. Change in amplitude whenever there's a change in offset. That's the kind of behavior we're going to look at. Example, if you look at the wet sand right over here, you will see that the amplitude doesn't change with the offset. But on the gas sand, you can see that the amplitude increases with the offset. So that's the kind of behavior we're going to look at. So when we talk about reflection, we are talking about the wave goes in and it bounces back. So imagine a ball, we throw it on a surface and it bounces back. That's why we talk about reflection. But that's not what happens in the real world. What happens in the real world is that when a wave goes inside your subsurface, it partitions its energy into P wave and S wave. So you get two waves reflected back, P wave and S wave. And if we're going to talk about the real world, what happens is that when the energy goes in the subsurface, it it's reflected in P wave, S wave, and then it's transmitted. It's transmitted into P wave and S wave. And in AVO, what we're trying to do is we are going to quantify it. And this quantification is actually what AVO is. So it started with Zupritz, which gave this fancy matrix to solve for solving AVO. But I mean, if you're pre-med like me, it's a little bit complicated for you. So I like these equations more. So now we have two-term and three-term equations. And if you look at the two-term equation, you will see that a plus b sine square theta. So it looks like a linear regression, right? And then we have C in the three term. So we added plus C, and C is covetousness. But why do we need that? So if you look at this chart right over here, you see how the two term follows it till 35, till the angle 35, something in between 35 and 40, and then it goes to its own way. So what we want is we want to follow the Zupritz equation. So for higher angles, we prefer three-term equation because it has the factor of covetousness in it, which follows the Zupritz equation. So this is the kind of trend you're looking in AVO. So you have your background trend, your wet sand, and the oil would go further away, and then the gas will go further away. It looks kind of like the density difference, right? So AVO can be divided into different classes, class 1, 2, 3, 4, and we divide them on the base of what kinds of behavior we're getting from amplitude when it goes with offset. So class 1, higher amplitude, higher positive to a weaker positive. Look at the class 4. So weaker negative to a stronger negative or a stronger trough. So these are the kind of behaviors you're looking at. And if you plot them on a cross plot, you can divide them into different quadrants. Class 1 would be in the fourth quadrant, while class 4 is on your second quadrant. 2p, and so class 2 is divided in two quadrants. So I'm going to choose Dr. Bedle's word here. She likes 2p and 2n, and so do I. So 2n will have negative gradient and negative intercept, while 2p you can see positive and negative. So that's how you go from 2p and 2n. So it's always negative to negative and positive to negative for 2p. So this is an example of AVO and how does it look like on a seismic section, how the amplitude is increasing, how you can see the amplitude is decreasing, and how the negative is changing into positive. So different classes has different behavior that we look at. Here, you see that we also run different AVO attributes to see what kind of behavior we're getting on seismic section. So this is an inversion example, how the tight sand would act and how a gas sand will just pop up right there. So this is kind of behavior you're going to look at AVO. And now let's talk about DQ. And before we talk about DQ, well, if I tell you, look at the seismic section and find me a channel, or even better, I'm going to say, follow this hod and tell me where the channel is. You're going to be like, huh? Where is it? I don't know. Maybe you do, but you'll have to focus. But if I show you the theta px attribute, it just pops up right there. So there's your channel, and your amplitude stops right before your channel edge. And if I give you a zoom version, this is your theta px. This is your seismic amplitude. You see how you can see your channel, but you can also see channel slump over here, and how you can see your AVO wall, the amount of detail you get in DQ. Well, I'm going to call it all water contact because I know it is an all water contact because it's also my research data, but you can call it a direct hydrocarbon indicator. So you look at the seismic section. I tell you, I'm giving you a hint. Look over here. Tell me where the direct hydrocarbon indicator is. You're going to focus and you're going to say, I don't know. Then I tell you theta px, and if you're going to say, oh, there, it pops up right here. So this is your direct hydrocarbon indicator. So you look at this image and you can see the difference of how amount of detail you get on theta px. So now we're going to talk about DQ attributes. And before we do that, we're going to talk about the inputs of DQ. So for DQ data to be computed, you need two types of inputs. You need a near stack, and you're going to need a far stack. So you have your gradient and your slope. This looks like an AB or cross plot, right? So this is your traditional AB cross plot on the green line, and this is a DQ cross plot on the red line. So the difference is the input, so near stack and far stack. So what you do is that in your new AB cross plot, your slope would be the far minus near stack, while your intercept would be your near stack, and you're going to plot it. And what's the difference you get? You look at the red line. This is your new AB cross plot. This is your green. There's not much of a difference, so you're not losing any information. But why do we do that? So we're going to apply 8 phase shift filters on this. And to apply this 8 phase shift, can you do it on a traditional gradient? No. So we're going to use the seismic traces for that. So we're going to use seismic stack for it. A little bit fun facts about DQ. DQ is a layer-based display. So instead of your wiggle traces, you get a layer display. So you can actually see your pinch out, your channels, where the new layer is coming in. So a lot of details. Your theta px resembles your porosity log. It won't tell you your porosity is 5 or 35, but it will give you a relative porosity information, like where the porosity is higher, where your porosity is lower. So it actually mimics your porosity log right there. DQ family attributes are the intermediate products, so they're not your final products. You use them as an input. Imagine theta px shows you information about relative porosity. You want to calculate hydrocarbon pore volume. Use that as an input to enhance your data, your outputs. And then it's an intention. There are exceptional utilities. I'll give you my example. So when I was picking on horizon, what I used to do was just go from one end, click, the other end, click, and it will just pick up the horizon for me. Then I just click on auto track, and it will auto track all the horizons in the seismic section. It's that easy because it's actually mimicking your layer boundaries, so it's very easy to pick the horizon. It's very easy to pick up the faults. Now we're going to talk about our first attribute, which is stichogram. It's a nice name, trust me. So stichogram, what you do is you go and you pick all your zero crossings, and then you go back and you pick all your peaks and troughs. Sounds complicated, I guess, but it's not. What you do is you go to your seismic section, you look at your seismic section, and you see where the difference comes in. For example, 438 going to minus 88. There's your zero crossing right there, but is 438 a zero crossing or minus 88? We decide whichever is closer to zero. So in this case, minus 88 is closer to zero, so it will be a zero crossing. But if you look from positive, now it's going to the negative. So is it a peak or trough? Going to negative, it's a trough. We need to decide which one of this has to be a trough. So what we do is we look at the values, whichever has the highest amplitude will be our trough. So in this scenario, I think 1676 is the highest, so it would be our trough. And then we go next. So you see 802. So that's how we go and pick our peaks and troughs. Once you have them, you plot them on a stichogram. But what about the doublets? How will we see that? So what happens is the one which has the highest amplitude would get the peak. We cannot see the templates on our sticktogram, but we can see our templates on our theta px. So you see these kind of streaks right here, these kind of jumps over here. So whenever you see that on your DQ family attributes, you know your templates are right there. So what we're going to do now is let's plot sticktogram. Okay, so once you open your AASPI and you go to your pre-stack utilities and click on AView attributes, you're going to click on DQ attributes and the window will pop up. What you do is you click on browse and you select your near data. You can also browse and you're going to click on your far data, but if your far data or your near data doesn't have far on it, so because I filtered for look for far because it's easier to go and look when you have a lot of data. But if it doesn't have it, you just go and you click on all files. Once you have your all files, you look at your all files and you can select and you look for the data you want to select. Here, I'm going to click on wall far. You have browsed, you've selected your data, you give your project name. It can either be your field name or specific project name you all want to give or something you like, whatever you want, you give it a suffix. So I'm going to give it 1. Here it's come to rescale amplitude. So rescale amplitude is near you're gonna rescale it to enhance your seismic. Now in this scenario, because it's Valve and it's very clean data, no noise, I'm not gonna rescale it, but I did try it on a data colony and it was a class 3 gas sun, but it has a lot of noise. And when I looked at the histogram, so our far data had a fewer, like a smaller histogram compared to the near one. So what I did was I enhanced the far stack trace to rescale to 1.5. So you can do it if you want. If you're using reverse polarity, you can click over here. So your shield baseline, in my case, I know it's going to be 400, but ideally start with 320 and you're going to look and see whichever works better for you for your pay. And you can see your start time and end time will come from your data. It will pick it. But if you want to crop it, you can do it right here. Right, so now you're gonna select whichever attributes you want to run. In this case, I'm gonna run all. So when we talk about the attributes, we just plot them. So we select all, we click on execute. You go back to your ASPI terminal. It started running. We're gonna we're gonna let it run, and once it's done running, I'm gonna plot it. So once your attributes has run, you go to ASPI. You go click on your visualization, and since it's a sticktogram and I don't have to overlay any wiggle, so I will go to single volume display tool, click on single volume 2D display. You see the UI of ASPI has changed a little bit. So click here, click on browse, go find your sticktogram. So here's my sticktogram and click OK. Give it a color bar, whichever you like. So for here, I'm gonna go with red, white, and blue for sticktogram. I like it like that way. So click on, there we go. Okay, red, white, and blue. Perfect. Okay, plot title. Let's give it sticker RAM. Right, everything looks good. I'm gonna decrease my increment so I can see my lines better. I'm gonna execute it. But I don't want to plot cross line. Let's look at the inline. Oh, this happens. Oops, did something wrong. So time goes at the top. The CDV goes like just 2, I guess. Oh, there you go. So you have your line here, and I'm gonna rotate my x-axis to match it to what it looks like in my research. So I'm gonna go to settings, click on reverse x-axis, apply, and click OK. So this is your axis right here. So this is your sticktogram right here. And let's go through it. Do you start seeing the geological features or not? There you go. Okay, you see these linear lines. You can see the parallel bedding right over here. You can see lens over here. And if you look how the break is, so wherever you see a behavior like this, you know there's a fault in your data. So you see a fault over here. You see a lens over here. So I'm gonna show you a picture on my slides. Okay, There we go. And this is an example of 1132 line, and you can see your convex up structure right here. So the lens over here, and you see how the small parallel bedding is and how the break is. So wherever you see this on your stichogram, you're actually looking at a fault. And you see those parallel bedding right here on a 1132. So you can see a lot of information. So if I well, this is all about stichogram, and we're going to talk about next attribute in the next video. And before we skip, let's do a movie mode of stichogram. Let me decrease the increment so we can see better. Okay, and let me reverse x-axis. Why not? Okay, this looks good. And let's look at it. So now what you're gonna do is you're gonna look at their features. You're gonna find the lens faults. You're gonna see the faults here and imagine this overlaid with your coherence attribute or your seismic section. So many July. There you go. But isn't that perfect? So this is all about stichogram.